Why do they never go in for me?
Hello, music lovers. Yes, back again. This time with a thread response. I haven't done one of these for a while. Yesterday, James Griffiths released a video where he celebrated the best of bands from, well, not necessarily the best, but a batch of bands from the West Midlands. And he highlighted The Move, ELO, which is something that he, is close to his heart. He loves those bands. And that led to a response by Steve Whitty, who is actually a true Brummie coming from there. And he highlighted a load of other bands. But I thought I'd pick up the slack. Now, they tended to go from around sort of the mid-60s through to sort of about 1980-ish, mid-80s maybe. Well, I thought to myself, I'm sure I know some bands from like the West Midlands. Maybe they're not the Black Country, maybe they're not but true Birmingham, but they are definitely from around that area. Maybe they're sort of slightly out Stourbridge, maybe they're from the other side, sort of between Coventry and Birmingham. Maybe they came from somewhere else and lived in Birmingham, one of the bands I've got here. But I thought I could just fill in a few gaps, add a few bands, and generally add to the response. So, I've got 9 bands that I think I've got this right. I'm sure Steve or other people will respond if I've got any of these wrong. But they are from the West Midlands. They're not necessarily from Birmingham. They're not necessarily from the Black Country. But they're bands that I know are from the West Midlands. Just to get that clear and out of the way. Right. I had to start with this band first. So this is the Ian Campbell folk group, and this is their third album presenting the Ian Campbell folk group. Ian Campbell was actually born in Scotland, but in 1946, I think it was, he moved to Birmingham, and he basically helped to start a folk scene in Birmingham in the late 50s. Well, started off in skiffle, went through to folk, apparently recording the first maybe British live folk album there. This really good folky stuff. He actually wrote a song that was covered by Simon and Garfunkel, but eventually left off a repress of one of their albums. Really excellent folk. You can tell it's the early 60s from the way they're dressed on there. But not only is Ian Campbell got his place in history as starting, being one of the founding fathers? Well, hoping to promote British folk, modern British folk in this country. He also is the dad of 3 members of UB40, and you can't get more Birmingham than that, really. So there's the Ian Campbell folk group. I've got another album by them. They're really good stuff. It's really good stuff. Really great folk. Right. So bypassing the 70s completely, because I think most of the big bands have been talked about. Sabbath, Priest, Wizard, Move, ELO, Moody's, most of them, yeah. So we're going into the 80s. Now this is why I'm going to spread my net a little bit wider, because a lot of these bands I'm going to talk about are actually from Stourbridge. They've got links to Birmingham, but mainly a lot of them are actually Stourbridge or just outside the other way. But now they weren't a successful band when they first came out. Now, the band I'm talking about is Diamond Head. They were a band. They were part of the new wave of British heavy metal in the 80s, and they never really got the success they probably deserved. I've only got this one album by them. I've heard other stuff though, but this is great. This is Am I Evil? I love that cover. Absolutely love it. It's kind of like a mix of steampunk and Nemesis the Warlock from 2000 AD. So I think this is a compilation. So they were a 4-piece band. Wrote one of the first bands in new wave of British heavy metal. Best known now for writing the song "Am I Evil," which Metallica later covered, but their version of it is absolutely awesome. And "Lightning to the Nations" is another cracking track. I'm not sure whether is this a compilation or is it his later sessions. I'm not sure, but it's a terrific album. Really check out Diamond Head if you haven't, because they're a good band. Right, another band from Birmingham that I know, and this is actually now. This would have been the first live band I ever paid to see, not counting like rubbishy local bands and stuff that just didn't matter. They were the first band on the bill at my first gig, which was UFO at Hammersmith Odeon in November 1985. And the first band on the bill was Shy, who are from Birmingham. I don't really know that much about them. But obviously they're important to my musical history because they were the first proper professional live band that I ever saw. Not one of my favourite bands. This is an okay album, sort of that quite polished mid-80s metal. It's not a bad album. I really must listen to it again, actually. But there you go. So a band that's quite important to me, Shy, with Brave the Storm. We're moving sort of to the late 80s now, which is when the rest of these records really came out. Obviously, Birmingham had a massive role in the birth of heavy metal. What with Zeppelin coming from, especially Robert Plant coming from the West Midlands area. I think he's Stourbridge as well. Stourbridge, there's something in the water there, I think. But also they played one of the biggest bands of the grind scene, grindcore, in the late 80s were this lot. So this is Napalm Death. Multiple lineup changes, but I think most at this point they were definitely based in Birmingham. I think they still are. This record doesn't have Shane Embry on it. He joined afterwards. I think he's a longer serving member now, but he lives in Birmingham. Mitch Harris was from Birmingham, who's on here. Bill Steer was from Liverpool. But yeah, absolutely. This album, when I first heard this album, it was totally blew my mind. I couldn't believe that anybody could play this fast, this heavy. I mean, we're talking sort of 1988. This absolutely blew me away. I couldn't believe this. So this was recorded in Rich Bitch Studios in Birmingham. So Napalm Death are still going after multiple lineup changes. But for me, that is the time. I've got this, and I've got From Enslavement to Obliteration. Is that what it's called? I can't remember. Seminal albums, to be honest. Probably just as important as something like Psycho Candy or I don't know, or even Black Sabbath. You know, probably just as important to metal, to be honest. Awesome album. Right, change of musical scene now. So we're moving from Meriden. So Napalm Death were originally formed in Meriden, but they've sort of moved around that area. We're going back to Stourbridge now, after Diamond Head. In the late 80s, there was a scene kind of... I remember it being called T-shirt rock, because all the bands seemed to exist on selling T-shirts. That's how they made a lot of their money. But a lot of them were quite popular, getting in the top 10, being quite successful, to be honest. But we've got 3 of them here that all originated from Stourbridge. So the first one I'm going to show is the magnificent Pot Will Eat Itself. This is one of my favourite albums. I absolutely think this is brilliant. So this is Box Frenzy by Pot Will Eat Itself. Pot Will Eat Itself were 4 guys who originally formed a Grebo band, just bass guitars and drums, and they were playing sort of fast-paced, buzzcocky type punky stuff. And then I'm not sure what happened. I think what happened was that somebody got a hold of the Justified Ancients and Moo Moo, 1987, What the F's Going On, and also Licensed to Ill by the Beastie Boys, because their sound did an abrupt style change in 1987. And that's when is this 87 or 88? Should get it right, really. I can't remember. But anyway, an abrupt style change into kind of, they still played with guitars, but they mixed it with hip-hop beats, dance beats, and as they progressed, they became more, they even verged towards industrial towards the end of it. I think they played with maybe 9 Inch Nails and stuff like that, bands like that. Really, in the British music press, they were ridiculed, unjustly so. Just shows what a bunch of prize arse-hats a lot of the British music press were. I loved them. I thought they were brilliant. They did song after song of absolute magnificent indie dance. When indie dance was apparently indie dance was a dirty word. So, bugger them. Anyway, this is magnificent. True Grebos. And now, Clint Mansell, which is... Not that one. There he is. That's Clint Mansell. Is a highly respected Hollywood composer. No less. There we go. Pot Will Eat Itself. Another band from the same area. Actually, they played in an early band, shared members with Pot Will Eat Itself and the Wonder Stuff, who are the next band from Stourbridge, based in Stourbridge. That band was called From Eden. When that band split up, obviously the Poppies were formed, and we had the Wonder Stuff as well. We got the Eight-Legged Groove Machine. This was their debut album. More frenetic guitars. This kind of laid down a template. I think this was quite sort of maybe quite influential on Britpop, because I think this is this could be a proto Britpop album, really. Typically British, absolutely British. Sarcastic as anything. Tracks like It's Your Money I'm After Baby, Unbearable, regularly cracked the British top 10, top 20, not quite so. They got a few top 10 hits. They actually had a number 1 with Vic Reeves, I remember now, with the cover of Dizzy. I've got that somewhere. Eventually became more laid back and a bit more folky. They added violins and stuff to the mix after Rob Basing departed the band. But true, this is a great debut album. Really great debut album. Absolutely love this. And there's the band. Right. So that's the Wonder Stuff, Eight-Legged Groove Machine. And there was still more stuff coming out of Stourbridge. There seemed to be a second wave of bands coming out. and part of one of them was Ned's Atomic Dustbin. This is their debut album, which is Godfodder. More of the sort of high tempo, punky, indie. Some great stuff on here. Best track by far is Kill Your Television. Absolutely moshed out to that loads. So there's a band on 30th Records. They fairly short-lived, really. I think they only put out 2 or 3 albums. Were only really successful a couple of albums and a batch of singles, to be honest. By the time that Britpop rolled around, I think by the time Suede released their debut album, a lot of these kind of t-shirty type bands, they all seem to call it a day around the same time. I think Poppies might have lasted a bit longer, but the Wonder Star, 95. So they kind of lasted into the fringes of Britpop, but then it kind of like Oasis, Blur, suddenly it seemed to roll them away when really they should have been capitalising. But I think they'd passed their sell-by date by then, to be honest. But terrific band, named after an episode of The Goons. So there we go, Ned's Atomic Dustbin. Oh, one of the best bands for me, they're one of the best bands from Birmingham. And they are Boston. And I'm sure that some of you might realise which band I'm actually going to talk about. Boston is Birmingham slang for brilliant. I don't think anybody's mentioned that yet. But the reason I mention it is because the next album I'm going to show is Boston Steve Austin. And I'm not doing an accent. I'm not that cheeky. This was... We've got a fuzzbox and we're going to use it. Apparently named because one of the band members bought a fuzzbox, and then one day on stage, I don't know if they had a name at that point, they might well have done, but she just yelled out, "We've got a fuzzbox and we're going to use it." So their name stuck. So they're obviously shortened to Fuzzbox a lot of the time. So this was Mags. There's Mags. Oh, is that Mags? Hang on. Mags, Joe, Tina and Vic. I can't remember. That's Vic. I think she was a drummer. That's Tina, I think. Oh, no, that's Tina. Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, there's the aforementioned Steve Austin. Star of the $6 Million Man. I'm getting the names mixed up. But anyway. Very funny career, really. They started off with a kind of wall of sound indie, using the fuzzbox as a basis for the whole lot, with sort of scratchy indie guitars over the top, but top-notch pop songs underneath. Things like What's the Point, Console Me, Wait and See, Love is a Slug. Brilliant title that is. Rules and Regulations was their first big indie single. They actually broke the top 40 in the UK with What's the Point and maybe Rules and Regulations. No, Rules and Regulations did it. I can't remember. They had another couple of singles off this album. Brilliant cover of Spirit in the Sky that doesn't sound anything like the original. I love covers like that. So eventually they had a record company. I don't know whether it was a record company makeover. It probably was, because they looked completely different on their second album, which was called Big Bang. And that's when they had their biggest hits like International Rescue, Self. They did a cover of Walking on Thin Ice. But I absolutely adored Fuzzbox, and one of the bands that are on the original C86 compilation, which is one of my go-to records. Fantastic stuff. Fuzzbox, we love you. And the final band, yeah, I got the t-shirt on. It's Birdland. Birdland were from Birmingham as well. Not sort of similar level of success as Fuzzbox, to be honest, or to start off with anyway. They didn't have a record company makeover to help them into the top 20. But they're 4 blonde mop tops from Birmingham producing kind of a high octane mix of television, Patti Smith, maybe some punky guitars, like maybe Buzzcocks-ish. But it was just rock and roll. Originally formed as a band called Zodiac Motel, who were more of a kind of an attempt at a psych band. I remember seeing their records, and I never picked them up, funny enough. I should have done. Lots of paisley involved in their look and crimped hair. They then bleached all their hair. Did they bleach it all? Cut it into mop tops, bleached it, possibly all the members that didn't have blonde hair, and started releasing this fantastic rock and roll. This is their only album, which is a bit hard to see, but there's a Birdland. You can just about... I've shown this before, Birdland logo. Biggest song was probably Sleep With Me, which grazed the UK top 40. Another band who just didn't seize their chance, really. They had a number of... They were building a nice momentum through the late part of the 80s, sort of 89, 90, and then the record company sat on this until 1991, and by then the momentum had all fizzled out, unfortunately. But they were a terrific live band. I saw them a few times, 2 or 3 times. Terrific. They gave away a free one-sided album at one tour, which is one of the best live albums I've got. Just terrific stuff. So there we go. A few more bands from Birmingham and the environs of Birmingham before anybody says anything. Well, thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks to James and Steve for terrific videos covering a whole slew of Birmingham bands. I'm sure there are other bands that can covered. I don't have vinyl from any of the others. I know there are some bands that I have CDs from, but I thought I'd stick to vinyl today. Right, thanks very much, and I'll see you all soon. Cheers, VC. Bye.